Want to hear from a highly qualified and informed person about what will happen with this Saturday state election? About the reality of the prospects of a new state? Well, then stay tuned. Welcome to Northern Vibe. Thanks for tuning in. If we've never met, I'm Matt Maloney, host and founder of Northern Vibe. We're about sharing stories. This is where discussions are held with interesting, informed people, their perspectives on a new state, and indeed any other issues that attract our curiosity. Every Wednesday, my colleague Pat McLaughlin or my other colleague does an excellent podcast on Podbean, Yes to a North Queensland State, Wednesday nights between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. Get the Podbean app and have a listen. It's my very great pleasure, I have to say, to have Peter Raffles back on the show. Let me tell you, he's an interesting chap to chat with and have a beer with. If you ever get the opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, shout him a beer. The price, I promise you, will be worth it. Now, on our last show, I made the observation that there really isn't much the chap can't do. He's the sort of chap that could fly you on a conflict zone. He could mediate the conflict, write a paper about it, go for a quick 50 overs, and then fix your boat so you can go fishing. Now, to put that in context for people who didn't see the last interview I had with him, Peter is a commercial pilot, and he used to fly former politicians around. That was part of the things that he did. He's currently the principal of Conflict Solutions Proprietary Limited, and he's an accredited mediator. He's worked on commercial disputes, remote Indigenous community disputes, industrial disputes, including the Qantas dispute, environmental disputes, and organisational change disputes. I don't mind throwing in a personal thing here too. In my job, I have a fair bit to do with communication, high-level communication and crisis negotiation. I've used a lot of the pointers that he's given me personally. He's mediated in Australia and the Pacific, including Papua New Guinea, where he's facilitated the creation of wealth and indeed the keeping of the peace. He's also a lawyer, a current member of the bar, specialising in administrative law, governance, employment, and industrial relations. He's got a real interest in constitutional issues, and he's demonstrated this by his publications. 2 out of 4 of his publications are on the new state. In 2017, the JCU Law Review published Formation of a New North Queensland State, Constitutional Issues, and the Procedural Pathway. And in 2018, the same journal published North Queensland, a New State, How the Voice of the Collective Can Be Heard. As I've also indicated, he holds a commercial pilot's licence, and like myself, he's a cricket tragic, but he's actually kind of good at it. Unlike me, my hand-eye coordination is somewhat lacking, and he indeed coaches. Look, at the risk of sounding like Tim from Demtel, ladies and gentlemen, that's not all. He started work as a marine mechanic and was the apprentice of the year 2 years running. So he's highly qualified. He is the chap to speak to when it comes to issues like this. Now, before we start the discussion, to our ever-expanding base of listeners, please like and share. It's really important. We are growing exponentially, and I'm looking at our screen right now. It's fantastic. Every episode we do gains more and more people, and that's because of you. Thank you, but we need you to continue to like and share. If you're new, put us out there. Northern Vibe is growing. We really need your help to keep up the momentum. Now, every week we do have a mention in dispatches, and this week my shout out goes to the Royal Life-Saving Society of Australia, our magnificent people in the orange and yellow little hats. Now, everyone in the country knows who they are, so I don't need to go into that. But a little known fact is they do a lot of work with freshwater drowning and incidents, and you're much more likely to die in freshwater than at the beach. Have a look at their site, give generously, and be very aware of still water, freshwater, water safety. Now, I've got Peter back to talk about the election. We're getting fewer and fewer people keen on going out on a limb and making election predictions. Now, Peter has done a bit of independent study about this, and without giving away too much, he does rely a little bit on the bookies as well. So it's a mixture of information sources that he's using there. Because it's such a brave move, as the fictional senior public servant Sir Humphrey Appleby said from the TV show Yes Minister, he is going out on a limb a bit. Well, Pete, the New State movement has been in the news a bit today, and we'll cover off on those articles. But first, thanks very much for coming on board.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, I assure you, the pleasure is mine, and I'm sure my viewers as well. Let's dive right in. What is going to happen with the election?
Well, it's certainly been since 2017. It's been a journey, hasn't it? You know, I think I ran as a candidate in 2017 as an independent for the North Queensland state and learned a lot about, campaigns and And as we head into this one with the COVID process, the local government process that we went through, and now heading into this Saturday, it's certainly going to be an interesting night, that's for sure. I mean, we and the family and many friends always have front row seats on election nights to see where the next 3 or 4 years of our lives, at whether a state or federal level or local government level, are going. As you introduced me, Matt, I've got a keen interest in the North and about the 7th state. And the North Queensland Alliance have been very much committed to winning the balance of power north of the Tropic of Capricorn, and the way that we've gone about, providing information and informing voters about their choice. And that's a lot about that, trying to win the balance of power is about, well, if you have the balance of power, then you can say to the state government, if you want supply, or if you want, to be stable in government, then do the right thing by us and establish a commission of inquiry into whether North Queensland is viable as a separate state, and if so, where the border might be. So this is a process that was, followed in New South Wales. Unfortunately, both the LNP and the ALP have not committed to that. The North Queensland State Alliance in the last week sent an email to every single candidate north of Rockhampton and in the 17 seats, and asked the question: if you are elected, will you support the establishment of the Commission of Inquiry to see whether a 7th state is viable and where the boundary would be? Not one ALP, not one LNP candidate replied, not one. So at worst, I think you might say, well, is democracy alive? When members of parliament putting themselves up for election saying, no, we don't want people to have a choice. That's pretty out there. As you know, I worked for a commission of inquiry after the Fitzgerald process, and I mean, Queensland's a very unusual place because there's no upper house of parliament, being abolished in 1922 by the ALP and Ted Theodore. And single house parliaments can work, and they work in places like, Norway, Denmark, first 2 countries on the World Happy Index, New Zealand. Interestingly, I think it's both of those countries, I stand corrected on this, but both of them have a process called CIRs, citizen-initiated referendums. Here we are as a single house parliament. When we were at the Commission of Inquiry, we considered it, but it wasn't a recommendation that was taken up, unfortunately. So, of course, in a citizen-initiated referendum, then we had the numbers, we could say, well, give us our vote. You mentioned the second paper that I published. And that
Can I jump in really quick? Can I jump in really quickly? Because there's a couple of things I really want to unpack there. Firstly, David Flint, who's a great supporter of Northern Vibe, and I know actually tunes in, so g'day, David. He's actually also mentioned the Citizens Initiated Referendum. A great believer of it, and he also made precisely the same observations that you did. So you have a strong ally in there. I'd like to make the observation that yes, Brisbane is a separate organisation to NQ State Alliance Incorporated. I had a very interesting conversation with Martin Bella, who's in the green shirts. Oh, geez, it'll be a few months ago now. And one of the things he said to me, and I got it. Like, him and I had a very robust discussion. We had some pretty serious disagreements on some issues, but the man's no fool, and I respect his opinion, and he's someone I'd kind of actually like to get on board. But one of the things he made the observation, and I was going to go into this later, but you've given me a fantastic segue, is that our organisations may be separate, but can you comment on, is this a Judean People's Front situation, or are we kind of working together, and not just this video indicating that? But, can I get you to make a bit of a comment on that? Because there are some people who perhaps come on board who are indicating that the fact that we're not one organisation means that there's no consistency.
Hello to Marty. I mean, I don't know Marty Bella personally, but a good footballer, and represents a community, and good luck to him. But I'd say, Marty, watch this space. Watch this space over the next couple of years. And last weekend, you mentioned being a cricket tragic. The bit you didn't mention was how much of a tragic cricketer I am. But last weekend, Cricket Far North and Cairns played North Queensland, which is the Townsville area, and down in Mackay, Rocky played, Mackay Whit Sunday, and, out of that comes the North Country cricket team and great strength. And so from the diversity of the North and, the Cricket Far North and Cairns and its communities all the way to the Cape and in the central part with Mackay and Townsville out to the west, is great diversity. But we are North Queenslanders. We live differently to people in the south corner. And I'll say it again, we live differently. We live in the tropics. We deal with different issues. And Marty, watch this space, because we will come together in the next number of years. And if we don't get the balance of power at this election, and I think it's going to go to the wire, then the next one, look out.
Thank you very much. That's really important, and I'm going to share this with Mr. Bella and some of the green shirts. And again, we had a very robust conversation. So it's I really do want to shout out to him, because the reason that I'm specifically mentioning him and taking the time out of this interview to do that is because we have a lot more in common than we don't. So
absolutely,
it would be great. It's fundamentally about representation. And look, really quickly, I don't want to go off too much on a tangent. This is going to be a 1 minute, under 1 minute thing. Mr. Bella indicated that he's concerned, and I see where he's coming from, is that he said, look, Matt, I feel like you're leaving people behind in the southeast corner. Like, you're going to have to draw a line somewhere. And he's right. Like that, you can't say that that's not the case. He said that means that there's a whole bunch of people who are going to be unrepresented in the southwest corner. And my respectful submission to that is that's not true, because as soon as you make a political body smaller, you make those people more relevant. And considering that people in Brisbane are going to understand that their wealth creation is going to be tied up with the farmers, with the miners, with everyone else who is creating wealth, then you're just not going to feel as ignored and as unhappy as you are. But we'll keep moving on, because I don't want to go off too much on that sidetrack. I just wanted to shout out to Mr. Bella and the green shirts.
Can I make just a quick comment on that?
Of course, yes.
His comment about leave people behind. The strength of our nation today comes from its structure, its federal structure. And so we move to a new 7-state structure, we grow as a nation. This is not about our fair share. This is about the growth of our nation. And I would say to Marty, look up and see the stars. And if you look ahead and say, look at where we are above the Tropic of Capricorn compared to below it. And I'm happy to share my picture on that and go, if you want to change this, you have to change the state structure. And I'm happy to come back and share my graphic on it if you want.
Mm. Yeah. No. Look, yeah. Well, the other point you made to keep the conversation flowing is this is about democracy, and this is just a validation of what you said. This is about, really, at its heart, yes, we're about representation. Yes, we're about empowerment. Yes, we're about autonomy. Yes, we're about control. Yes, we're about all these things. But all those things come under the subheading of a simple principle: democracy. No representation without, no taxation without adequate representation is not a joke. It's not a cat cry, and we're kind of serious. And so when we're doing this, and when I'm discussing it with people down south, and I've had a couple of other excellent people come on, like I've had David Pello, who's a Brisbaneite, come on and go, look, hey, go hard, you guys. I really want to see this happen. And because he believes in democracy, he understands that representation, and this is about making the system valid. Because you made that point before. You go, well, when reasonable people start questioning democracy, we are on dangerous ground. And I had another excellent interview with the Institute of Public Affairs. It's two magnificent, razor-sharp young minds from Melbourne. And the reason I got them on board, because they have no skin in the game personally when it comes to representation for North Queensland, but they see it as the issues of Senate representation. They see it as, let's make democracy legitimate. One of the comments that they made was there's really, really large numbers of young people today, so people at university and people coming through high school, who simply don't believe in democracy. They kind of think it's a rigged game and a bit of a joke. Now, that's concerning. That's concerning. Those people are absolutely ripe for reaping for totalitarian causes. Any totalitarian cause. Doesn't matter how you frame it. Now, that's really concerning. When people stop believing in democracy, that's a, hey, let's take a step back moment. And so for anyone who's even, yes or no, ambivalent about the new state movement, if you've taken the time to listen, thank you very much. Understand that this is a deeper cause. This is about making democracy relevant. This is about making the Commonwealth work better. If we get a new state, everyone in this country will benefit, and I sincerely believe that. So, Peter, we'll continue on. Mate, I'll get you to, let's go into because we promised all these people these election results, and you are the chap to speak about these things. So let's dive in.
Right. Yep. Well,
if you want to share any screens, give me a yell.
Yeah. Look, I want to share a screen now, and so I want to share a couple of screens. So I'll share the first one if it's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm hoping that came up. Is that up on screen?
Yep.
What do we got here? So it's a very busy graph, but so if I can just go through it a little. What's on here over in the left column are the 17 seats from Rockhampton North. Yep. So 93 seats in the Parliament, and they're the 17 north of Rocky. So what we have in the third column is who the seat is held by in red and grey and yellow and blue. So the ALP holding 10 seats out of the 17. Yep. Katter Party holding three, the LNP holding just 2, One Nation in Morani, and of course North Queensland First in the Whitsundays. What we have in the next two columns is what the primary vote was for the candidate that won the seat. So we see here that, for example, in Cairns and Michael Healy, 30.45% of the primary vote. And we look at the margins, which is in the next thing, what the margins of those seats are, and say, well, which ones are likely, to tip one way or another. Shane Knuth with 19.75% margin, is fairly strong, and Robbie Katter out there in, Traeger with 28.49% margin. So you're thinking it's hardly likely that those seats and Curtis Pitt in Mulgrave will hardly change. Cynthia Liu up in Cook at 5.8%. So it doesn't look like that's much of a change. So then we move across into the next column, and what I've done is I've captured the sports betting today. And what we've got in the winner of the seat and their odds at the moment, what they're saying will be the winner, and then the next two candidates or the next two parties there. And of course, Mulgrave, there's no betting on it. They're looking at to be pretty safe. What we find is a couple of interesting seats. For example, Barron River. The margin is 1.86%. And the bookies sports bet have got the LNP at $1.55 and the ALP at $2.40. So that's a potential change. Yeah, it's an interesting seat from its history. Cairns, not much of a chance of change at $1.70, $2.05. We look at the primary vote there and you say, oh, maybe it's a chance, but certainly the bookies are not saying much. Hinchinbrook, Nick Demetto, as I said, I ran in 2017 and Nick got my preferences, which enabled him eventually to win the seat. But I hope Nick's very much committed to North Queensland State. And so I hope that betting is reflective and Nick wins the seat. Coming a bit further on, we get down to the 3 seats in, these are the 3 seats around Townsville. And there's been a lot in the press, in some of the press, not only online press, but certainly the written press. It's talking about how important Townsville is and the 3 seats in Townsville to whether the LNP or the ALP governs. The indications are, well, Townsville's at $1.95 and $1.95, so it's going to be a line ball down to the wire. Mundingborough, Coley O'Rourke, of course, stepped down. She polled about 31%. The margin's 1.13. Les Walker, who was a councillor, ALP councillor in Townsville, is the candidate for the ALP. The LNP candidate's an ex-police officer, and of course, crime has been a fairly big issue in Townsville. But my sense from history is that 2%, 2% in it, in an issue of crime in an election. That's what the reflection is about people affected by it. You know, Ben Chifley and Bob Menzies, you know, were two sort of political icons from our national history, and both of them said the most sensitive political nerve is the hip pocket nerve. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether Mundingborough is going to go down to the wire or not. And in Thurrangower, what's interesting there is that the ALP is at $2.10 and the Kappa coming in at $2.50, the Qatar Australia Party. Interesting. Come further down the list and we get down to the seat of Burdick, and this is going to go down to the wire in my view. Sam Cox, of course, is former LNP Member of Parliament, One Nation candidate in 2017. His family and certainly come from the Burdekin, so there'll be a fairly strong personal following there. Yeah, if I don't bet at all. And in the words of Richie Beno, to go back to history, never bet on anything that talks, which I think is one of the great injunctions of life. And of course, you know, politics, you go, Foof. But if I was, I'd put $1 scratch it on Sam Cox actually giving that a shake down in the Burdekin. We moved down to down the coast and these seats are organised down the coast, down to the Whitsundays, and Jason Costigan, of course, was elected for the LNP in the last election, running under the brand of NQ First for this election, 0.68. The LNP coming in at $2.10 and Qatar Party at $2.50 and NQ First with Jason, $4.50. So the bookies have got him as a bit of an outsider at the moment. Mackay, I don't think will change hands. I think that's pretty safe at 8.34%. Moreni, $1.20 and LNP $2.50. I think Stephen Andrew will hang on there. Always a bit difficult to get a bit of a straight answer from Stephen about where he stands on a new state. And of course, One Nation doesn't support as a policy a new state. They say they would rather see the reinstitution of the upper house. See where that goes. Rockhampton. And we get down to the next seat, which is the one that bit of a surprise for me in Keppel. The LNP $1.50 to win that seat. So what we see is we've got these over in the first column. We've got Barron River, Hinchinbrook, Townsville, Mundingborough, Burdekin, Whitsunday and Keppel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seats potentially changing hands, you know, this Saturday night. So I want to finish off with two other bits of commentary. We go down to the bottom here. What I've done is got some data around about the One Nation vote. And if we look back in 2012, that 0.1%, the vote 0.92 and 15. 2017, you know, in Queensland, 14% of the vote, but in North Queensland, 21.73% of the vote. That's a big number. And, you know, where that plays out, it's sort of showing its hand in a couple of seats here in Morani. Yeah, it's also, if I can stop sharing that, and any comments you want to make before I stop sharing that, Matt, or you want any questions?
No, not at all. I'd just like you to make a comment on, you know, I really wouldn't mind a comment on just how relevant, really, when it comes kind of right down to it, just how relevant we are changing electoral results north of the Tropic of Capricorn.
Well, the majority in the parliament at the moment is 2 seats. And so, you know, some of the commentators and opinions are that, you know, oh, well, Anastasia Palaszczuk's done a very good job of managing, you know, COVID-19. In my view, so was New South Wales, apart from, you know, the Ruby Princess, and so was Western Australia and so on. We are over $100 billion in debt. and as in the words of Chifley and Menzies again, the hip
Could you say that again? How much money?
$100 billion.
Yeah. Yeah, our children are going to hate our guts, but do go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's an astronomical number, and it's sort of something to be, thought about and say,
I
well,
don't know why it's not an issue. I don't know why the parties aren't jumping up and down about this.
yeah, good governance. If we look, I want to come back to my picture in a minute. If you hope you let me come back to my picture.
Absolutely.
And say, look,
I'm sorry to interrupt.
where could we be? But look, there's a couple of other seats. The One Nation vote. I'll stop share that. I just want to share one more for the election. So these are a few seats. Now, it's just is that up on the screen there? Is that all right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I'll just expand that a little. So these are the seats in the southeast that are coming up, as possible, game changers, and the trend here is, is towards the ALP hanging on to their very small margin seats, and possibly in Palmerston, the ALP winning the seat here at $1.50. I'm not in other seats in the southeast. It's a bit of a shock here in Maryborough. So that's one to keep an eye on Sunday night, is the seat of Maryborough, and whether the One Nation, they're at $5.50, but at 2.5%. I looked at the rest of the polling numbers today, and I thought, gee, that might be a bit closer than what we first think. So yeah, that sort of sums it up. So 7 seats, if 2 or 3 seats change hands, 4 seats change hands north of Rocky, we get down to the last number, the last betting. So a hung parliament is $3.50, and no hung parliament is about $1.35. So the bookies are not saying we're going to see minority government, but my view is that it might be a bit closer than that, I think, on Sunday night, but that's just a personal hunch, intuition. Yeah.
Look, I have to be honest. I do put a high degree of confidence in the bookies.
They're the guys that are going to lose the money if they get it wrong.
Yeah. They're not perfect. I mean, it's
no.
Thank God, and there's been money in my pocket in the past as a direct result of that. So, I find that kind of reassuring in a lot of ways. But I heard a really interesting podcast from Scott Adams, who does the Gilbert Cartoons.
Yeah.
Indicating that there's a lot of people now who are actively lying to pollsters because they want to distort.
Yeah.
Because they get it.
Yeah.
They don't trust these pollsters. They do trust democracy, but they want these shock results. And again, look, we are in really, I don't want to harp too much about this, but it's a point that I really do want to make, because I think it's very, very important. Democracy, a belief in democracy is at the heart of a belief in a new state. If you really think that democracy matters, and you really think that process that empowers people matters, then you're going to be in power. You're going to be in favour of a new state. And the fact that we've found allies in Victoria, and we've found allies in the excellent David Flint, we've found allies in other commentators. Look, Bernard Salt, is kind of in favour of us. Like, I don't want to completely misrepresent, what he says, but he goes, when I asked him the question on my interview, like, Bernard Salt, I'm such a fanboy. I said, well, why should people like this? He goes, do you like democracy? He got kind of dismissive, Peter. He got really dismissive. He goes, why wouldn't you? The question in his mind is not, why would you be in favour of West New State? It's like, why wouldn't you? So, I find that really, really, really reassuring. And perhaps some very, very interesting things, may end up happening on the actual day itself.
The principle of subsidiarity has a very long history, and I think its origins are somewhere in Catholicism. But the principle of subsidiarity is that decisions should be made as close to the people they affect as possible. And so, we've got a government based in George Street, with no upper house, in the words of Tony Fitzgerald, with no upper house, no Bill of Rights. and they control the chamber, they can do what they like. And that's as simple as it gets.
Yeah.
Can I share my screen with you on my
Yes.
final share? I promise it'll be my final share.
Oh, right. Share away.
All right, this one up on our Facebook. We've had it up a couple of times, but I forget who it says is, the four or five big pillars of a community, society, and economy. Water, energy, transport, healthcare. Water. 40% of the landmass above that line, the Tropic of Capricorn. 60% of the rain in Australia falls above that line. There's 5% of Australian major dams above that line. 5%. That's CSIRO data. And you go, right. And we've talked about the Bradfield scheme forever. Since 1939, successive governments have come at the federal level and said, oh, the Bradfield scheme, the Bradfield scheme. And including the current member for Kennedy. What's changed? What's changed since, the 1930s and 40s? Nothing. Nothing has changed. And when we get down to the numbers of it and democracy, there's 1.2 million people approximately above that line. There are 6 senators. There's 515,000 people in Tasmania and they've got 12.
Mm.
Don't tell me this is balanced. Don't tell me that we're equal in our democracy. There are 5 federal seats with 900 odd, 100,000 people. Sorry, 100 odd thousand people in the seat above the Tropic of Capricorn in Queensland. Tasmania has guaranteed 5 and 60,000 people elect them.
That's right.
It's a mendicant state, and we get to the current situation in the last week with the announcement of Project Iron Boomerang. Anyone read it, anyone. I exhort any of your readers to go and read about Project Iron Boomerang and go, whoa, but it will not happen whilst there are 6 senators above that line and 70 below. Democracy? Our kids, you talked about cricket, netball, league. How long did it take us to get our own football team? It took us 100 years to get our own medical school above the Tropic of Capricorn. And what do we know about global warming? We know that tropical diseases are going to be moving south. And so we need our research centres, in the north. We need our funding in the north. 6 senators? It's not going to happen.
See, that's it. Like, this matters to everybody. This matters to everybody. And I really, 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 so if you've come this far and you're watching us, please like and share. Peter's passion is infectious. But the other great thing, and I'm sorry to say very positive things about you while you're kind of here, is this chap is kind of switched on. He knows what he's talking about. It's not just that he understands the philosophical issues. He actually understands the mechanics of what's going on, and we've demonstrated that. And one of the things that I found being passionate about this new state early was that I could talk in principles, because that's the way that my brain thinks. It's kind of this big picture principles. Oh yeah, I understand how that pans out everywhere else. For the vast majority of people, and this is not like a judgmental good, bad, it's just the way, different human minds work in different ways. They kind of don't get it unless you personalize it. So unless you say something like Project Iron Boomerang, great thing, empower us all. 6 senators there, can't make it happen. 70 senators there, can't make it happen. And really, when you kind of think about it, Peter, if I can just make this really quick observation before I go into my next, into my next question isn't that astoundingly like having 73 electorates in a 250 kilometre radius of the southeast corner of a state and 20 electorates for what? Over 1 million people, and I don't know how many off the top of my head. I'm sorry, El Presidente, I know I'm supposed to memorise this stat, but how many 100,000 kilometres outside of that 250 kilometre radius? Really? What do we have to do to get people to kind of understand that this is empowering us is in their interests as well?
Yeah, like the healthcare issue that I raised, it's real, and 100 years to get our own medical school, 90 something years to get our own law school, and dentistry, that, close to the same. It's not.
I read an excellent paper by one of your colleagues, Henry, did I pronounce it correctly? Frackier?
Oh, Henry Frackier. Yeah.
Frackier, yeah. That was a beautiful paper. I really, really enjoyed reading that, and quite a bit. So actually, if you are speaking to him, could you pass on
Yeah, I will. Oh,
my
absolutely.
respectful regards and indicate to him that I've stolen a lot of his work. Well, I shouldn't apologise really, because I just stole it and I use it all the time.
It was Henry who coined the phrase "we live differently," and the fact is we do.
Yeah, and it's so simple. But look, as much as I'm enjoying this conversation,
Next, yep.
we've made the news. This issue that we're both so passionate about has been in today's Cairns Post, the Courier Mail, and I've been informed of other regional newspapers. Now, to paraphrase the article written by Madura McCormack, the Catters did some polling through Reachtel with 350 voters in the important swing seat of Munningborough. Apparently 57% of respondents strongly agree with the push for North Queen for NQ to split from the south. Now, 17% were indifferent. These are swing voters, and as the issue became more prominent, they will have to take a stance. So I really think we're going to gain a lot more people from that. Now, while a combined 26 disagree or strongly disagree, even some of the disagrees will come around. Now, when I've made this comment to other people, they said, well, maybe you're going to lose some of the agrees. That's possible, but once people see the logic of this argument and they understand the reasoning behind it, which is what we've just been discussing, you get more come around because of the principle of the matter. And this polling, which incidentally validates our own polling here done by Brisbane, which I will discuss a little bit further, revealed voters in the region were strongly supportive of seceding from the south. As a result of this polling, the Catters announced they will push for a referendum to split North Queensland within 6 months of a new parliament. Effectively, that's a policy. And if I can make this observation, a lot of that surely was as a result of the actions of your magnificent organisation, NQ State Alliance, in that area. In my mind, clearly there can be, yes, there are other dynamics that are impacting on that, but the fact that you guys have been so active there for so long has impacted. Also, clearly, Jason Costigan making the new state central policy contributed to the Catters making such a decisive move. Robbie said it's clear that the only way North Queensland can get a fair go is for the region to be able to determine its own future. We've just got your election results. I believe, and I'd like you to comment on this, so I'm going to go out and make a comment myself. I believe that minor parties will shape the next parliament. Now, it mightn't be the case that they actually hold the balance of power. That's not specifically what I'm arguing. But through this pressure and through raising the point that this is a real issue, we might end up getting what we want. Can I get you to comment on that?
As I said, it's the momentum. The momentum that's building is something that, if we go back all the way to 1897, it was touted, and of course 1898 we didn't vote. Queensland didn't vote in 1898 in the vote to become a federation because North and Central Queensland wanted to be separate. So, and it's waxed and waned over the years. But I think if I could be so bold as to say, if there's something that's changed over the last few years, and that is the rigor that's gone into the arguments. And that's not just myself. There's Colin Dwyer, there's Mr. Cummins from Cairns. Bill Bates, of course, has done a lot of work. And the attention that's come to it from that work, from a number of the existing parliamentarians, and that includes the member for Dawson, Bob Carter, of course, and saying, well, yeah, maybe it is time. And so the opinions are growing. Where to from here? And next to this Saturday night, of course, is it's a big night. And we say, well,
and how appropriate is it that it's All Hallows? It's Halloween. There is going to be a lot of lost souls. There is going to be some spirits wandering. There's going to be some Walking Dead. It's all going to be happening on that evening.
Yeah, it's also my son's birthday, so I'm hopeful that by the end of the front row seat that we've got in front of the election night, we'll be toasting not only his birthday, but hey, we're in the deal, to negotiate something. Let me go back to a comment you made about Robbie Katter and there'll be. I don't think it'll be Robbie Katter on his own. I think it'll be maybe Mr. Andrews from Morani as well. It's going to take a whole team. But 1 or 2 weeks ago, there was an article published in one of the papers about the things that the Katters were saying were not negotiable for government. I was very disappointed to see that on the table wasn't this diagram. And I hope the viewers can see that. Yes,
they can.
And this is a process out of our handbook, and it says, well, 2020, you establish a commission of inquiry. It says, yes, it's viable when you go to the referendum. There is a need for an independent commission, as there was in New South Wales in the 1930s, leading up to the referendum in New England, because this is a complex issue. It's just the issue of boundaries, for example, about where a border might be, is a very complex issue, heavily affected by water. And, as we know in New South Wales, water became a very pivotal issue in the subsequent defeat. And so there is a need, but it needs to be independent. And I would encourage and say to Robbie and to Shane and Hill, and whoever, Sam Cox, if he's elected, and Nick and Mr. Andrew, if you've got the balance of power, then have a look at this diagram and say, this is not negotiable. We are not asking you to create the state. We're not even asking you for a referendum. What we're asking for is an independent umpire. What, $2-3 million? Peanuts. $100 billion we are in debt. $2-3 million to put this process in place to get. If the answer is no, okay. If the answer is yes, then give the people their choice. Democracy.
Absolutely. And look, by way of explanation too, because I know there's a lot of people who tune into this who are Katter voters, and kudos to those people. I think it's it's great that you're exercising your democratic right. But when organisations like Boot Brisbane do a little bit of, I suppose, what could be called, goading is the wrong word, but a little bit of being a constructive friend to organisations, a constructively critical friend to organisations like the Katters, is because to us, this issue is so very important and so pivotal. What we would hate to see is this issue being used as a playing card. So it's like, well, we'll stop talking about this if this happens. And one of the things that I can indicate, Peter, if you'll indulge me for a moment, from speaking to guys like John McCall, and that was a brilliant conversation. Although I did get a little bit fanboy with him, and some of the viewers have even kind of like messaged me and going, "Oh my God, you kind of kissed his bottom." But he's an amazing man, and for a guy, no one like me to be able to kind of talk to him and get his opinions and speak to these other people. They've all kind of indicated that there's a lot of horse trading going on here, and there's a lot of dynamics you've got to be aware of. And so that's why we kind of do jump up and down about this. I've spoken to Rob a few times now, and anytime I've interviewed him, and I always remind him of this, I said, Rob, you make me Katter curious. And he loves that. He kind of laughs about that. But I did find it reassuring, this newspaper article today, because admittedly it wasn't a policy declaration. So, you know, I've had people kind of email me and go, well, what do you think about this? It's not quite a policy declaration. I think, you know, I think, because I kind of want to believe, maybe I'm being Mulder here, but I think that if push comes to shove, really, when you've come out so publicly and said this, how can you not be held to account? How can you not be held to account painfully about this? And you know, hoping that, you know, Rob strikes me as a decent chap. You know, I just hope for the best. Maybe I'm being a little bit naive. I am aware of the horse trading. Well, you know, I'm not going to say I get it, because I probably don't. I'm aware of that dynamic, but I kind of think that they've been pressured into this corner to make what is effectively a policy statement.
Oh, in the last few days in the press about the state. Yeah, and that's a good thing. Look, in 2016, you know, there was an opportunity that I thought was missed. It got pushed in a motion in the House. We're at a, hopefully on next Monday morning, we're at another opportunity. And I would say to every single person, whether they're in the Katter Party, the One Nation, north of Rockhampton, what do you want to do in the future? Do you want to be remembered as somebody who was in Parliament that kept North Queenslanders as the serfs of the Southeast? Or do you want to be remembered as someone that gave our kids a better future and their kids a better future? What do you want to be remembered by? It's time to lead. No more deals. It's time to lead, and not lead just in a narrow sense about North Queensland breaking away. It's a time to lead for our nation. We need to grow. COVID-19 has smashed our economy. We need to grow. The Federation needs to grow. Lead.
I was speaking to Rob Pine and some other people about that lost opportunity. I'd really like your take on that. If you could explain, and just to really quickly, and I know this is going to be tough, but you know, we do still have a little bit of time, so you can explain, you can give some contextual information to what happened for people who may not be aware of what you're talking about. We do have, by way of explanation, we have our demographics are indicating that we're getting some young viewers who might not understand what you're talking about.
Okay, so the Labor government had a majority government when it went into power, but along the journey there were two events. Rob Pine, as I recall, resigned from the Labor Party and sat as an independent in the House, and the member for Cook left the Labor Party, and so that left it as a minority government. And so you got a member in Cook, which is the Cape, member in Cairns, plus the Katters, and so the balance of power was there. And the motion went to the House for a referendum for the people of North Queensland to become a separate state. Robbie Katter moved it in the House. No member of the ALP nor the LNP voted in favour of the motion. All ALP members voted against it, and some LNP members actually abstained from voting. And I don't want to take that any further. And so there were people in that chamber that night who've come out and subsequently said they support a new state. Well, I'd say to them, you had your chance, you didn't take it. If you get your chance after this election, step up. And if you're not going to step up, step out.
I'm going to throw something out. Now, I wasn't really aware of this issue, except in the most abstract of terms at that time. If you had to throw into me the idea of splitting the state that quickly and just kind of pushed it onto me as something that I needed to all of a sudden think about, there's a very good chance that you know, now that I understand the issues, believe me, like I'm all over it. I'm St. Paul, but you know, the scales have fallen away from my eyes. But I think if you push this too hard on people too early, that we might kind of lose. Now, I know you and I have had conversations about this in the past, and I really found it. Now, I quoted you actually after our first interview. I said, well, you know, I had this really interesting conversation with Peter Raffles, because I've raised the point. And I said, look, you know, if I really wanted this to lose, like if I was sitting down in Brisbane and I'm a member of one of the big parties, because it's not a Labor LNP thing. It's the unfortunate reality is the LNP are not on board about this either. If I wanted this to lose, what I would do right now is say, you guys want a new state? Let's have the vote now. Let's do it. Now, boom. 2 months' time, a month's time. Because I suspect that it would be a lot closer than we think. Now, I'm going to counteract my own gut feelings by giving out a survey that we did just recently that I find really, really, really reassuring. And I see how much you guys have kicked bottom, like making this an issue in Townsville. Now, Boot Brisbane did a survey. You'll have to pardon me for reading. But there are a number of issues that there are a number of questions that we asked. And we did it through a credible research organisation. The question was, there were a number of questions. The two that I'll discuss were question 3. Would you like to see a new state formed in Central and North Queensland? And Northern was Townsville to Mount Isa. Now the Northern area, again, considering that we've really done minimal work there. Don't get me wrong, Boot Brisbane's been out there. I know you guys have done some stuff, and I know some councils have been talking about this a lot. Yes, 48%. I mean, that is really, really good. No, 33%. Undecided, 19%. I think we could sway a lot of them, but we would need time. So on a yes-no basis only, really, including the kind of like undecided, that's a yes of kind of 60 to 40. So we would probably win Townsville to Mount Isa. Now, out of the regions, Northern and Townsville region, they scored Townsville region scored highest in favour. Although, and you guys had the least amount of undecided. So I think a good way of interpreting this figure is that they're the most confident that people in Townsville have pretty much made up their minds. It's like, yeah, we're kind of tired of being ruled by Brisbane. Now let's look at some of the other regions. Now in Mackay region, same question again. Would you like to see a new state formed of Central and North Queensland? Outright yes, 40%. Outright no, 28%. Undecided, 28%. Now that puts it again, jigging the figures in our favour and being optimistic. I totally kind of accept that. That puts it at 59 to 41. Now Mackay was very much in favour, as well close to the Townsville region, although it has a lot more undecided. So they don't have the confidence. People in Mackay don't have the confidence that the Townsville region had. Now in the far north, I was kind of surprised of this, and it indicates, Boot Brisbane, by way of explanation, we're a new organisation and we're working hard up here. Far northern region, so that's Cairns region, Cardwell North. Yes, 34%. No, 34%. So that's pretty much even peggings. Undecided, 33%. So really that's, yes, no only, that's 50-50. So we've got a bit of work to do there. But something really reassuring, Pete, and I wouldn't mind a discussion on this, although we are coming up to the last couple of minutes. So this will probably be our last discussion point.
Yep.
16, or the other question we asked, question 4B, if the party you normally vote for does not support the new state, would you change your vote to a party that did support a new state? Yes, 16%. No, 17%. Undecided, 27%. Now, for complete clarity, so people understand our methodology, there was a blank of 40%, and they were the people who kind of said no to the new state generally, right? So we didn't kind of include on them. It's like, well, maybe your mind is made up. We were looking at the people that are kind of already there. So, they're voting for LNP, Labor, probably one of the bigger parties. Would they change their vote? 16%. What do you think?
There's some startling numbers, actually. I was a bit surprised by the numbers in Cairns. I thought the mood would have been a bit stronger. Yeah, the voice in Townsville and the regional areas, I think I'm not surprised about. Would people change their vote to the party that they voted for? That's the one that strikes me, and I think there is an opportunity there. No, and when I say opportunity, I don't want to be taken out of context here and say, oh, you know, there's something we'd go out and target, whatever. This is a free process. What I can't help but think is, if the material that we've collectively put together over the last 3 years is made more widely available. I mean, our handbook, we worked so hard to publish the handbook on creating the new state. There'll be a second version coming sometime in the next 12 months. The more information that's out there, insurance, for example, we're going into a La Nina pattern. We're about to hit a 2010-11. We pay well above what Brisbane and Sydney pay for their insurance. Without, they say, oh, because you had a higher cyclone risk, but our houses are actually built for the higher winds. We have already paid for it in the way we built, and so we're getting hit with stamp duties as well on top of that. The argument is not sustainable. So the minute you say to people, well, hang on, we're getting smashed in our insurance costs, and there's no justification for it. If we have that debate and we broaden that debate, I'm very much sure that vote will strengthen. And hence why, from the North Queensland Alliance point of view, State Alliance point of view, we go to the Commission and we say, I would love nothing more than someone as eminent as Tony Fitzgerald to be chairing that inquiry, given his history with the systems of government in this state, and say, you know, Mr. Fitzgerald, your last task and your career as a judge and whatever is to independently chair a panel to see whether North Queensland and the Federation should grow. Wow, what a day that would be.
Oh,
what a day.
Indeed. And look, one of the comments made on the Facebook page is we are getting quite a few comments. Thank you very much, incidentally, to all the people that are commenting on there. We had one gentleman make the indication that Cairns, or I'm going to paraphrase because I don't want to use the word Mexicans as he indicated there, but to kind of put it politely, to rephrase what he was saying, we've got a high degree of people from south. We've got a higher itinerant population kind of moving up.
Yeah.
And I can say that one of the members of Boot Brisbane, and I can publicly announce this because he's done the podcast now. Like he's come out, he's out of the closet. Is Pat McLaughlin. Now he's a New South Welshman, and once we started discussing this, and like it was over a few beers, he goes, "That's it. I'm on board."
Yeah.
To North Queensland, this is now my state. Like I intend to put down roots here. This is where my family are going to raise. This is where everything else. And this is the issue for me. This is something that I'm passionate about. And it does link back to one of the constructive criticisms. And we're going to finish off in the next couple of minutes. I really wouldn't mind you thinking hard about this. I know you've probably got a half a slogan in mind. But Bernard Salt said to me when I was interviewing, he goes, Matt, you've got all the stats on your side. Okay, that's a glacier. He goes, but it's kind of dry. I'm a demographer. He goes, I understand how you need to change things. Stats and facts alone aren't enough. You need an emotional pull. You guys need a slogan. You haven't got your slogan. So, Pete, what's the slogan, bro?
Yeah, we live differently is one that, we've thought very long and very hard about it, is that we live different. We are a people, and it's about identity. We had a discussion about what's the Queensland floral emblem. It's the Cooktown orchid. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so if the state was to split, who gets it? Them or us? No, it's ours.
It's ours, baby.
And that's the reason that we have purple as one of our colours, because it is about the Dendrobium bigibum. It is about the Cooktown orchid. And it's saying, no, it's ours. And about we live differently, Matt. Look, let me finish off in saying, I would say to Robbie Catter, to Nick DeMeadow, to Shane, to Sam Cox, and whoever else is in the group if you get elected on Saturday night and have the balance of power. There's one not negotiable, and that is the Commission of Inquiry, so that we can put the data together so that it's a compelling argument. And for Marty, I'm going to finish my last comment with to you, Marty. Last weekend, you know, the boys from Townsville, all the age groups travelled up to Cairns and played Cairns in the north part of the cricket championships. And what do I know? I know they sledged the crap out of each other on the field. But you know what? When the championships are over and the northern team is picked, it's tight. It's really tight. And so, yeah, Marty, we might have differences from Mackay, and that's a really good thing. But when we come together, it's about us, the people of the north.
Look, it's 1 minute past 7. We've gone a little over an hour. I could talk for another 20 minutes, but it's an hour-long show. Thank you very much for coming on board. Can I impose on you to like and share as well through your networks?
Absolutely.
Stay on the line. I'm going to do a little quick outro plug. We are getting a lot of really interesting locations now. People are kind of starting to message me, so of where people are from, and we've had some really unusual locations too. So, like, thank you. Hello, Charters Towers. So please tell us where you're from. Ask questions, make comments. If you've got any suggestions, don't hesitate to tell us. If you want to come on Northern Vibe, because like I've had a couple of people go, oh, please interview me. And my answer is probably going to be yes. So if you want to come on board, come on board. Now, right now, we're unashamed new state advocates. But after the election, well, depending on how things go, if things go the way we're headed, I might be ridiculously busy. But we are growing and developing. And once we get this new state, Northern Vibe is going to continue to exist, perhaps in a different format. So keep an eye on us. We're going to be continuing our interesting conversations with well-informed, interesting people like Mr. Raffles, who is my...
Can I share one last anecdote with you?
You may. It's...
After I finished my law degree, I went to Brisbane and worked for the Queensland Electoral and Administrative Review Commission, EARC. And that was to review the systems of government in the state and freedom of information, public assembly laws, and so we did. And so I'd come from the north, and one afternoon we were sitting thinking about proposals and how we were going to roll them out across the state. And another lawyer in the room said, "Oh, we should be doing, you know, we can do that and we can do that." I looked at him down the table and I said, "How would you think a person in Almaden might access that?" He looks at me for a while and he goes, "Where's Almaden?" I said, "It's just north of Nambour, somewhere just outside Mareeba." And the point being, there's lots of people coming on, you know, board. Well, fantastic, but Queensland's a really big place. The north is a very big place. And so hello to all the people in Almaden tonight. You got a Guernsey a bit way back in the Commission of Inquiry that you probably didn't know about, but yeah, hello.
Yeah, and look, you know, there's about 1,600 kilometres between Brisbane and Cairns. That's about the distance from London to Warsaw. Now, I remind people that there was a city between London and Warsaw that tried to unite both London and Warsaw between the years of 1939 and 1945, and that didn't go all that well. So yeah, all we want to do is be able to represent ourselves, guys. You know, we're not asking all that much. So on that, look, thank you very much, Peter. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'll get you to stay on air, actually.
Yeah, I'll stay on air. All good.
I'll stop the live feed. But thanks very much to our listeners. Like and share, and see you next week.